Valerie Jarrett, nice to see you. Thanks so much for spending a little time on our web show.
Oh, absolutely, Katie. And it was terrific to see you earlier today.
Well, thank you so much. Listen, I'm sure you have a positive response to the president's speech. What else would you have? But did anything strike you tonight as a particularly important or climactic moment for the president?
Well, I think it was interesting to see how the gallery really rallied around the sense of working together, America winning for the future, that we're going to come in number one, that we can compete on a global marketplace. I think everything that unifies our country really resonated in the room. And judging from my emails that I received right after the president concluded his remarks, I think that's really a big part of what resonated, focusing on our children, our education system, and really in making sure that we can compete. And I think that sense of hopefulness and optimism was just what our country needed this evening.
When do you think the gloves are going to come off, Valerie? When do you think or do you think perhaps it will basically devolve into politics as usual? You know, the House has already voted to repeal health care reform. It was largely symbolic, but Bob Schieffer and I were at a breakfast with John Boehner this morning. They really want to dismantle health care, and if they don't do it in Congress, they're hoping the courts will do the job. So how will you find common ground just even on that issue alone?
Well, I think that we're going to, as the president said this evening, if they have ideas that will make health care more affordable, that will help us bring down costs, we're open to those ideas. He already mentioned right away fixing the 1099 problem that has hurt so many small businesses. He mentioned looking at malpractice reform, something that he suggested last year that it was a Republican idea. So he's going to search for common ground, and we're optimistic based on the lame duck session where we really did manage to find common ground. And you know, everybody didn't get exactly what they want, but we had a very productive session. And so with that as a foundation, I think that gives us reason to be optimistic going forward. I mean, the president said tonight, look, it's messy. Our democracy appreciates the full spirited debate. That's part of what makes our nation strong. But that doesn't mean that we can't work to find the common ground. And that's what the president is committed to doing. And we're very hopeful that there is reciprocity on both sides of the aisle.
A lot of people were urging President Obama to really consider tort reform, as you know, while health care reform was being sort of developed. Is he really seriously going to look at tort reform? I know he's argued before it's just a small percentage of health care costs, and certainly trial lawyers are a very powerful lobby and very important to the Democratic Party. How serious is he about that?
Oh, he's very serious, Katie. And in fact, in the Affordable Care Act, there were provisions to have some demonstration projects around the country, which are moving forward. So he's absolutely committed to it. Look, what he's interested in doing is making sure that we can really bring down our costs, make sure that we're providing affordable health care. We already have provisions that are beginning to kick in place. You know, I have a young adult daughter who was able to stay on my insurance until her insurance from her job kicked in. Seniors are receiving help for prescription drug costs. If you have children with pre-existing conditions, they're already being covered. We're making sure that insurance companies can't discriminate against people who have these pre-existing conditions, and that people aren't subject to lifetime caps. When you need it most is when you've been sick for a long period of time. Well, no longer will you be subject to those caps, and trying to contain premiums. And so I think the American people don't really want to see all of those benefits being taken away from them. And so we're hoping that we're going to find many issues. The president presented a very robust agenda focusing on what we can do to improve innovation and education and infrastructure, and taking a look at government and seeing if there are ways that we can streamline government, make it more efficient so it services the American people better, and bringing down our deficit. Those are all issues that have historically been bipartisan, and so we would expect to find that common ground.
You know, he did take the long view when it comes to investment and keeping America competitive, and as you said, focusing on investments in innovation, infrastructure, and education. But what about job creation in the here and now, Valerie? Obviously, unemployment is now 9.4%. It's dropped a little, but for 20 straight months, it's a record. It's been over 9%. Are there just things that do you think the president's hands are tied in some ways, that he's done everything he can in terms of job creation? Because I think unemployed people watching tonight probably didn't have a lot of reason to celebrate.
Well, look, Katie, we've just been through the worst economic crisis in our lifetime. It was a very tough 2 years. One of the reasons why the president supported the tax package at the end of last year was to make sure, number one, the people who are unemployed have their unemployment benefits extended for another 13 months. Also, those who are most fragile have the earned income tax credit. We have the child tax credit. We have the payroll tax credit. We have an incentive in the tax package for businesses to invest because they're allowed to expense their costs, and so that gives them a reason to invest. And just last week, the president appointed Jeff Immelt to form this new Council on Competitive Jobs and Competitiveness. And so we are optimistic that we aren't finished yet. There are still more things that we can do to grow the economy.
And so you think jobs will be created in the near term as a result of some of these actions?
Sure, absolutely. I mean, as of right now, when people are receiving their first paychecks in January, they're taking home more pay as a result of these tax cuts. Just in the last 12 months, for 12 consecutive months, we have seen private sector job growth. We've seen over 1 million jobs created over the last 12 months. And so, yes, we are moving in the right direction. At the end of last year, our companies around the country reported record earnings, and the stock market is going back up. So there are certainly economic indicators that we're moving in the right direction.
And finally, Valerie, because I know you have to leave, I'm just curious. Obviously, it was a fairly somber setting tonight because of Gabrielle Giffords and what happened in Tucson on January 8th with members wearing black and white ribbons. And we saw a photo of Mark Kelly watching the State of the Union address from Congresswoman Giffords' hospital room. A lot of people were hoping that the president might at least mention gun violence, the fact that 34 Americans are killed by gun violence every day in this country. And that President Obama chose not to broach that subject, which might seem slightly ironic to some people given the environment he was speaking in. How do you explain that?
Well, I think that really the purpose of tonight's speech was to focus on the economy, growing our economy, focusing on jobs. In the days, weeks ahead, I'm sure that the president will have more to say about gun violence. Certainly when he was in Tucson, he made a plea that we can disagree without resorting to violence and really encourage the country to focus on civility. And that will be a part of his ongoing dialogue, Katie.
All right, Valerie Jarrett, White House Senior Advisor. Again, thanks so much for stopping by.
You're
It's
welcome.
good to see you and good to talk
My
to
pleasure.
you. Thank you.